when you have an interest in something, you persevere, you keep trying. It's difficult very often, but because you're interested and because someone's helping you build up some of your skills and capacities, you keep going. Now, what that does is it also builds perseverance, resilience, and a lack of fear of difficult, because you know you've tackled difficult. Hi, Radhika. Long time no see.
Oh my God, it's been years. I have a 12-year-old son, so that's how long it's been.
It's marvelous.
How are you doing? How are things with
you?
You?
Good. Thank you.
I've been keeping tabs on what you've been doing surreptitiously. So I know you've been to India. I knew that you made some trips here.
Yes, we did. We did some outreach work. That's already very interesting, actually. We're just in the middle of developing an emergency response to crisis for children. And we've taken a few early steps. It's called community-rooted education, which we first trialed in Hyderabad, just outside of Hyderabad, in the rural areas. Now we've trialed it in the townships in South Africa.
Wow.
And we're now going to take that model, which is a very loose model because it has to fit different communities. But we're going to take that model and we're going to apply it in on a sort of block by block concept, which is if you get together with a lot of other partners in a particular small area, if you all work together to change the sort of physical landscape and provide good education for the children, train the local people, not in full Montessori, but in enough, then does that have a kind of ripple effect on the other areas around? So we're going to try that. We're going to try working with people, 𝕟𝕚𝕚𝕚𝕚 in the north, and see how that works. And then we've got a Ukraine war response, so it's how to work in really crisis disasters. And then we're going to have a go in Mexico at migration and safe places for families and children, the sort of stop-offs on the migration routes, and see if we can do a bit of training there to get, again, not the full Montessori, but enough to make really child-friendly spaces and educationally supportive environments for local people.
Wow. So I'm curious about the Anganwadis in Hyderabad. Are you looking at linguistically? Do you teach in Telugu, Hindi? What are the languages that you're...
Yeah, whatever the languages of the local people.
Wow.
The model is that we take diploma holders from the region who already have Montessori diplomas, and we have facilitators that will train them. They then deliver that to their local locality, so that people are teaching in their mother tongue fundamentally. Since I saw you last, we've also done a huge project in the Samburu with the Samburu nomadics.
Oh.
They teach in 3 languages, actually, because the language of education is English, the language of communication is Swahili, and then they have their own Samburu language, which is Ma. So the teachers in Samburu are local people who teach, each chooses whichever one they're going to specialize in for the children's sake, and then they each speak whichever of those languages is their chosen language.
That's amazing. Now, with indigenous communities, or when you work with nomadic communities especially, how do you manage to bridge that gap between cultures and not, so I read Things Fall Apart by Chinua Achebe. And
I haven't. Oh, yes, I have read it. Yeah.
That affected me so much. And it made me so aware about getting into a culture and being able to maintain elements of it and not disrupt it completely, and yet bring some modern. So are you able to do that?
Seems so.
Wow.
Because if you focus in on the absolute essentials of Montessori education, you've got fundamental child development. You've got the idea that you must teach in community. You've got the idea that if you're exploring animals, it's the animals of the region. If you're exploring plants, it's the plants of the region. If you're exploring social responses, it's the cultural social responses of the region. We get the teachers that we train to make their own materials. You've got to choose whatever the local available resources are, and still you can make beautiful materials, but they're made locally. So the teachers also have a sense of ownership of the things they've made. If they've got 10 children, they've got enough. If they've got 110 children, which is possible, they just have to make a bit more.
That's really amazing.
Yeah, they're not dependent on people fundraising for them to give them stuff. I mean, one of the things that for us has been quite challenging, I would say, is that people see what's happening and they want to give them things. So, somebody will come by, because we can't make, for example, for the 3 to 6 year olds, we can't make cylinder blocks unless you go and get a carpenter to, and so forth. So, if they can get a local carpenter to make them, well and good. But if they can't, we just don't, you just don't have them. And there's enough other things that are going to help the child with their development of visual perception and, abstraction and so forth. There's enough beyond that can be made. But then someone will come and visit from, a country that is possible to donate cylinder blocks, and they'll say, oh, we can give you the cylinder blocks. And the teachers, of course, they want everything they can for the children. So they're likely to say yes. And then we say, well, actually, that isn't helpful at all. Thank you.
Yes, that's such a shift from when in 2009, when I had come and visited the centers, and there was so much focus on the material for teacher training. And what I'm hearing you say right now is the flexibility that's come in.
Right.
And is that something that you've brought into the programs?
Not me personally, but I think that when you have to respond to need, and you have, you want to make impact, you've got to actually work out what's essential.
Right.
So you can have the full Monty, as they say, or it is also possible to make big change, even with essential elements. And once people understand the essential elements, you've shifted, transformed actually them, their standing in the community, their capacity to hold down very important work, and also to be responsive and adaptable to the needs of the children.
That's so amazing to hear. I mean, there was a poem that I remember by William Blake. He written it in 1794 on how a child felt going to school, and said, but to go to school on a summer morn, oh, it drives all joy away. Under a cruel eye outworn, the little ones spend the day in sighing and dismay. And I know I hated going to school growing up, but my son, who was dyslexic, as a result of my seeing the Montessori methods, went to a Montessori school called Sapling in Pune, and he absolutely loved it. I know that Montessori has come a long way from 100 years ago. And based on what you've just told me, are there other things that you all have added to your repertoire?
Indeed. I mean, if you think about the work that's going on with elders, which I know, again, you made reference to. So we've discovered that, again, if you use the principles of, I guess, a number of things. One is we focus on the individual, and it's an asset-based view. You don't look to see what people don't have or what children don't have. You look to see, where are they developmentally? What are they able to do? And how can we build? So bringing that into the elder care space is really interesting, because, of course, what you're doing there is you're saying not that this person has dementia, but this person happens to be living with whatever it happens to be, a lack of capacity to walk, a slightly forgetfulness about sequencing. Maybe it's dementia, and dementia can be many things, we know. So when you look at that and you say, well, who is this person? Which is the same question we'd ask for small children. Who is this person? What are their interests? What connects them to the world outside? What experiences do they have already? And what can we help them in the elder world maintain rather than lose? And how can we keep them connected and active to the greatest extent that's possible? And so in taking that kind of attitude, I think a couple of things change. One is, your fundamental respect for humans, which is felt. So you're not looking at someone, what can we, oh, they can't do this and they can't do that, and what can we do? Oh, we better do this. And, you think, this person's lived this amazing life. They know more than I do. Or, how can we really honor that? So what do we need to do? What developmentally appropriate activity, so age-appropriate activity, do we need to do to strengthen the capacity to raise the fork, the knife, to cut with their fork? How can we now build this back? How do we build homes and residencies that are supportive? Because, as you know, Montessori always talks about a prepared environment, and it means you prepare the environment for the needs of the age.
Right.
So, if someone can't remember what's inside their cupboards, then can we have glass cupboards so they can see inside and they don't have to not know what's in the cupboards or not even remember that there is something in the cupboards, because now it's on view. If I used to be able to make myself a cup of tea and now I haven't got the sequencing for that, then how do we help them? They can read. So, okay, let's make some little tape menus, if you like, as to how you go about doing that. How can we not institutionalize them? Because the moment any one of us is institutionalized, we actually begin to lose our own autonomy, our sense of autonomy, even the sense of wanting to do something. So what you do is you look at the human person center. Of course, you have to have the science that goes with it. But by using your Montessori principles, you can actually create an inviting, active, living, both home and residential experience that delays the onset of helplessness. Let me put it like that, because you know that every human wants to help themselves. We can't help that. That's a human attribute. We want to be active. We want to be doing something. We only lose it when people are doing things for us so much that we lose the confidence that we can actually do that ourselves. So we're having a huge amount of effect in residential homes and for carers who are looking after people in homes. And research is showing that they're medicated much less, they break their bones much less. When they fall, they do still fall, but they're because they're sort of much more active, their bones are not quite so brittle. Research is showing that they delay their incapacities considerably, and frankly that the carers and the residents, if they're in a residential home, are happier. We've actually also applied our thinking to sport. We've looked at engaging and approaching the practice of sport, again in a Montessori way, which is very contrary to how many children engage with sport. So many drop out because it's very competitive. So many drop out because they don't fit the profile of good at. Whereas, we've looked at this all the way up through into professional sports. We're even helping professional coaches look differently at the way they coach, and we've combined that with research on age bias in sport, which is in professional sport, which is immense. So we've combined that by saying, in Montessori we have mixed age groups. We need to reorganize how we organize sport in schools in particular, so that children are not pitted against just a 12-month age group, but and so they can also play to their capacities. A younger child that's got more coordination is playing up a little bit. Children who are younger but in a different year up, maybe just a day difference in birth, they're playing at least 2 or 3 years down. And we've got a few people now looking to do experiments in mixed age rather than cutoff dates, which is how most amateur and professional sports operate. And if we can then add in, which we hope, the Montessori approach, which is if you're good on your left, let's try on your right. If you are very tall, let's not just assume that you're going to be the shooter if you're doing basketball. So we've got a new approach to that, because we think that through that approach, we're going to engage lots more children and hopefully into adulthood in the idea of sport can be for everyone.
Wow.
Professional sport can also be open to people who traditionally have been excluded, unless they've been brilliant at it and therefore, in some way already had those capacities. Whereas, as we know, many people develop those things as they go along in life, rather than always just start with a natural propensity. And also in the Montessori way of looking at sport, we also have the children, for example, decide why the rules. Let's leave some rules out. Let's see what happens to the game when you leave rules out. Let everybody be a referee of some kind, because that gives you a totally different perspective on what judgments are having to be made. And as with everything that we do in Montessori, we rate observation, both observation of the coaches and teachers of children, very, very profound observations, so that they're really learning from data rather than just learning from instinct. Not that instinct isn't good, it's very good, but if you have other things going along with it, you get insight.
Right.
And so that insight is really important. So I guess we've been putting a huge amount of importance, which Montessori did, but perhaps we've been emphasizing again, not only your own insights from gathering observational data, but also having, when the children are capable of it, ensuring that they are also reflecting themselves on how they feel, how they've done, what they would like to think they could do more of. Researchers are now starting to look at multiple, still not enough, Radhika, honestly, still not enough people looking in the research. So anything you can do to help people take a look, that's marvelous. But a lot of longitudinal studies going on, as you know.
Yes. I know, and I was so fascinated because the last time we spoke, you were telling, this is in 2009, you had said, we need to get more studies. In the conference, you had spoken about that. And then I started seeing all this literature coming out where there's a Montessori school, people outperforming those who, and there's random selection where people were asked to attend 2 kinds of schools. By the end of kindergarten, I read, at least in these preliminary studies, that Montessori groups excelled in reading and math. They exhibited more positive social interactions, displayed advanced social cognition, executive control, and so on. And while reading that, I felt this is exactly what you were talking about. So when you just said that there's a longitudinal study going on, I'm so curious to know who's doing it, where is it happening, where can we read about it?
Yes, that's actually at the University of Virginia with Angeline Lillard. She's been studying government Montessori public schools, again with the random selection, so that's very important. So she is looking to follow those students way beyond elementary school up into leaving college and so forth. So they're engaged in that at the moment and doing a lot of studies. One of her recent studies was really astonishing, and this is the one that she's extended out. What it appeared to show, but it was a very small sample. So I know that she is involved in, and the school is involved, because there's a lot of researchers now in the school looking. But it seemed to show that if children had been in Montessori environments that were well run, because also that's not always the case. And, I know that we do have to be very cautious of that, because the name Montessori, as you know, can be used without any fear of anyone saying you can't use that name. It's out there. You can call yourself anything you like. And the training also can be in depth, as AMI follows, or it can be very shallow, if at all. So I want to make that caveat because it is terribly important. But where she's chosen schools where the training she knew was good, it seems as if Montessori education can override the home environment if it's very impoverished. Now, that would be really interesting. It's too small a sample to say that that's the case, but of course, one of the criticisms of Montessori is that the people that choose it are very often the people who themselves have marvelously, good backgrounds, and they themselves are very Montessori inclined and so forth. And so, how do you distinguish the home environment factor from the Montessori factor? Is it not just a double excellence sort of thing?
Right.
But this seems to show, because it's random and it's public education, it seems to show that those children seem to have the same advantages as others. And that for us would be really an incredible research. But there's been research on executive functioning. There's currently someone doing their PhD on movement, the fundamental power of movement in executive functioning, and seeing, does Montessori have a part to play in that, since the children are constantly moving? and constantly refining their movement, and that they can be inside or outside. They don't have to be inside all the time. So does gross motor coordination play a role? So there's that kind of research. There's research into the concept of wonder and beauty, and does that have an impact on motivation and interest? So there is quite a bit going on, but not enough. And the other elements, I would say, that people have started looking at, there's a lot of historical also research on Montessori that's going on, which is fascinating, because what it's showing is the huge humanitarian imperative that Montessori felt. You know, there were war orphans that were being helped. There were children, she wanted to help children in conflict places. She was looking at youth who were incarcerated because they were not imprisoned, but, you know, in homes that were kind of, she wanted to have Montessori for, or not, when I say she wanted to have Montessori, she didn't know what having a Montessori was. She wanted humans to study them and provide environments that would be life-changing for them rather than keep them from doing things. She was really looking at anthropology at one stage to say, well, what is the social condition of humans and how can we help that evolve? Also trauma, which today is a very big issue for youth and also for the teaching profession, let's be frank. We've had some historical exploration with papers being written on her view in today's term is trauma, but in her days was, you know, children who were showing all sorts of signs of depression and those kinds of things because they'd either experienced, you know, life-changing events such as earthquakes and so forth. So we are trying now with that, looking at how important that was to her, children's rights, very important to her. You know, right. The child rights, the Convention on the Rights of the Child was only really fully ratified by countries in 1989. Yeah. She was involved at UNESCO with the Declaration of Human Rights. But when she saw it, just at the very end of her life, she said, there's not enough here about children. Where are the children's rights? So again, we want to bring into our training of teachers a much sounder understanding of what that really means, so that we can give it legs. You know, if children know that they have the right to express themselves, the right to be listened to, the right to a name, you know, there are so many things that we could amplify in today's world. The other research that we want to have done that nobody has done yet is there is so much on sustainability and ecological literacy in her work. Now, we have it in the work that we've been offering, but if you don't pay attention to it, you don't amplify it. Right. And so again, you know, now beginning to look at all of the sort of, she called it a cosmic vision, but the cosmic vision was everything is interdependent, and that what humans have done can either beautify and add, super nature can add to nature, or the opposite. Now, again, it would be lovely to have research done on both the historical origins of all of that thinking and how it emerged. A great deal of it emerged in India when she was in India during the Second World War. Yeah. A great deal of it emerged there. And how does that then play into the nuances of the way we educate today? And how do we, in being conscious of that, transmit that consciousness in action and expectation to the children that we're dealing with? So, you know, there's still a lot to do. That will I feel all the seeds were there because she was, in my opinion, a genius. Honestly, if people had looked at her as a designer of educational tools, I think she'd have won awards for it. Yes. You know, but nobody looked at her like that. I don't know whether it was because she was a woman, possible, or because education wasn't seen as being in the forefront of architectural design, or in the forefront of the way human beings designed houses to live, or in the way that the modern movement suddenly showed abstraction, for example, in the 30s. You know, this idea of the artistic move to abstraction. Well, what are many of those materials, if not concrete versions of abstract concepts? I just feel there's so much that we haven't even begun to think about that could be valuable.
I mean, so when I read Maria Montessori and Piaget, and then when I went and actually visited your center and I saw the aesthetic of it, you spoke about a sense of wonder and just seeing things laid out the way they were. It was so beautiful and pleasing to me. Also, when I saw the embroidery on the table where you had to place the table mats, I started using that when I worked with clients with head injuries way back in 2009.
Yeah.
And because it's easy to get things embroidered in India, we realized that at a very low cost, I could use many of the tools that I saw you all use very systematically here. So I'm not surprised that you all have moved into working with older people, with people who have issues with independence. And the other thing that you spoke about when you say interdependence, I know that in India, we are all very interdependent. And since I'm married to an American, when I go to the US, I realize how independent they are. And that contrast is far more visible to me as a result of seeing different cultures.
Yes.
So when you work, I know that you have a part of, I think what you all do is called something without frontiers.
Yes, 𝕟𝕠𝕚𝕟 sans frontières.
Yes.
Educators without borders. Yes.
So are there any takeaways that you have, or something to share, something interesting that you have to share with us based on your work in different cultures?
I think humility. You never have the whole answer. You may have an answer, but it has to be folded in to the wisdom of the place and the people and the culture. So whatever we take of Montessori philosophy, thinking, developmental understanding, prepared environments, prepared adults, whatever that is, which is, I think, of course, magical, you have to go with the intention of people saying they don't want it. So it has to be community embraced. And so a lot of the work is not saying you need this, but saying, tell us what you need. Would this be helpful? How would you do it? What do you see in your children? It has to feel owned by the communities, and it has to feel that all it's doing is giving them a tool to help their children. And the wonderful thing about that is that, Montessori never said anything about culture, actually. She said, look, you have a development of children, you have a community that they need to grow up in, and they need to be in that community. Let's not separate children out on a yearly basis. Now, actually, most cultures don't argue with that. We know what it's like having a child in a family. We know that if we have we have one child in our family, which many of us do, we seek other families. We know that we look for community. That's what we look for, because we know that children learn from everything around them, and they particularly learn when they are in the company of other children. And we kind of know that. So it doesn't matter where you are in the world. People will say, well, in our culture, you never ask questions of elders. Let's take that as an example, which is true of many, 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 many cultures. So the question would be then, well, but if you want to ask a question, how do you do it? Because what we like to think the children do is feel free to ask a question if they don't understand something, or if they've had an insight or a wonder. So we know in your culture, but if you did want to ask a question, is there a way that would happen? If you as an elder wanted to have the children in your family or your community ask you a question, how would you ask them to do that? So it's not about saying, these children have to be independent, therefore they have to ask the questions, therefore it's about saying, wouldn't it be nice though if that could happen, because that helps everyone grow, but how would you do that in your culture? And if it's difficult, to do, then how else are you going to help the children to feel that they can explore till the end of their interest, or that they can actually not just do what's given to them, but go beyond what's given to them, so that they can actually then pursue an interest until really they've got to the bottom of whatever it is. And we know that's true, don't we? For, it doesn't matter whether you're 18 months and just watching something disappear when you post it into a hole. That for the adult it looks meaningless, but for the child something's going on because they're so engaged. If they weren't engaged, then we'd be tearing our hair out. Oh, they're fractious, they're crying, they're doing. But sometimes we see a child doing something meaningless to us, but if they're engaged, we know something's happening, right? Something really is happening. But then what about your 12-year-old or your 15-year-old who's really asking deep questions about how the world works? How do we then help them to continue that interest? Because that's what interests them. And then see that from an interest in insects, let's say, just I'm choosing something out of the blue, but from an interest in insects, you can go into biology, art, science, music. I mean, there are so many things that you can branch off once your interest is deep, that you can branch off and discover, which isn't given to you on a subject basis. It's given to you on the fact that all knowledge is interrelated. And that when we connect knowledge up into, and that's what I think is so fascinating, and I don't think any of us really can ever really understand the beauty of this, because it's endless, is that Montessori's knowledge is the knowledge that we do offer the children. We always expect them to go beyond. And so that knowledge is a three-dimensional matrix. It's a three-dimensional matrix that a child sets off in a particular direction, and they hit upon something they like. And we ask ourselves, do they have all the skills, physical, intellectual, mental, yet to understand this? If not, what's related to it and what will help them understand it? And if they do, where else can they go with this interest? And that could take them again off into multiple places. And a Montessori teacher, as such, tries as best they can to have in their own mind this three-dimensional matrix, so that they can say, oh, look, this child is taking this route through everything, but this area over here hasn't been touched at all. So they still need that for their growth, their development, and academia. They still need those things. So now, how can I get this pathway to divert now over into this pathway, so that there's no negation of responsibility on the part of the teacher, but there is an understanding that when people bring interest and knowledge to something, then something that didn't appear interesting becomes interesting. When you bring some kind of level of feeling of confidence, of expertise to something, then something that previously you haven't felt confident to tackle becomes something that you can. When you have an interest in something, you persevere, you keep trying. It's difficult very often, but because you're interested and because someone's helping you build up some of your skills and capacities, you keep going. Now, what that does is it also builds perseverance, resilience, and a lack of fear of difficult, because you've tackled difficult. And when you broke it down and you tackled it in smaller amounts, or you got confident in one thing, but you were less confident in another, you still built. Now, that's really, for me, what learning is all about. That you learn not because you're afraid of things, but because you know you have the capacities to tackle them. And that's true of all our children, all of them. It's important that we have names for things, but it's not good when those names curtail what we think we can offer those children.
Right.
Children in my day had very specific names, and we didn't even know half of what was possible. And so, children were these were all normal, and then the odd child had X or Y. Nowadays, we just say, hold on a minute. Who knows what normal is, right?
Yeah.
What does that mean? I mean, what you can say is typically developing.
Right.
But within that typical development, there is every shade of everything. And so what we want for our Montessori teachers, and this again, you asked me what's kind of new, I would say, is we want to empower them to look at children as simply everything there could possibly be. So so this is who's in front of us. How do we help?
Right.
And then the only thing that one has to ask is this now beyond what I can do? And do I need help to know how to help?
It's so reassuring for me to hear words like, neurodivergence, spectrum, beauty, delight, magic, wonder, all of these things you said, and science in that mix. But the one thing that you said earlier struck me as something that I did not know, that Montessori, if you have to become a teacher and if you have to be trained, you can get trained anywhere, or is there a specific place I can go to that that's valid? And can you recommend some names in India that people can go, where do we go?
Now, and that is a very, very good question for a couple of reasons. One is that accessibility, I represent the Association Montessori Internationale, and accessibility is one of our big challenges, which we have set us, where we have a 5-year new strategic plan. And the word accessibility is really important to us, because actually good training isn't that accessible. And so then, one can seem, I would say, negative about people getting any kind of training, which they seek. So there is, there's a dichotomy there also, because we want people to get trained in the ideas and the philosophy, and yet, let's say the training I would recommend isn't always available to them. So what should we then say? Don't do it at all? No, that's not right. That's not right. So, of course, I'm going to say to you that the Association Montessori Internationale, AMI, trains its teacher trainers really thoroughly. And so any teacher trainer from AMI has to have taught for a minimum of 5 years, the entire age group that they are representing. And that's a minimum, so most people have taught quite a lot longer than that. They then have to do a minimum 4-year teacher training course with AMI. And that involves, they have to write research papers, they have to write their lectures from the standpoint of today, they have to attend different courses. Now we do have blended courses, so that's great. We have in-person courses. We don't have to train teachers. We don't have fully online courses because we believe in the powers of experience. We want people to experience nurturing students in the same way as we want them to be nurtured in the same way as they would nurture the students they're going to be engaged in. We want them to have explored the matrix at a much deeper level than just listening to it, because listening to it, intellectual constructs are one thing, experience is completely different. Once you've experienced something for yourself, you can say, oh my gosh, no idea this was so complex. I had no idea it related to this and this. I'm now seeing if I hadn't done that, I wouldn't understand this. So the experience for us is still extremely important. So I would say, yes, there are Association Montessori International courses in India, for example, but all over the world. At the moment, we have courses in 74 countries around the world. So obviously, I'm going to recommend that. Then there are, of course, other courses that you can do. And I would say that, if possible, you need to look for a course that is extended over a period of time, that ensures that you get hands-on experience, and not just hands-on experience in a school, but hands-on experience from an expert. Because the expert, just as with all of us, we all need a guru, right? Of some kind, who generally simply poses the questions. And then we start, oh, I didn't ever think about that. You must have someone who is not just passing on what they learned from somebody else. Honestly, then I'm saying to people, read the books and do your own thing. Read Montessori's books and do your own thing. Look at some of the really good books that have been written lately. Then rather do your own thing. I would say there are lots of people doing this good courses. There's reasonably good courses, and then there are some that you shouldn't really go to at all. So, and the buyer beware thing, I think, is just, I couldn't tell you the names of all the different ones, because globally I'm not sure who's around.
But people can go to the AMI website, and I know you have an Indian on the board.
Yes, we do. We have Anuradha Shankar. She's a wonderful person, and we have lots of training centers also that are doing courses beyond their own regional confines. So we have one in Bangalore, in Mumbai, in Chennai, in Hyderabad. We owe this new community-rooted education to two of our Indian colleagues, in actual fact. Uma Ramani and Halas Mohan who's done it, and they pioneered it, and now, as I said, it's being used in South Africa. We're trying to use it in emergency situations, and we want to use it as a new way of from schools out to their localities, so that everyone's doing better. What's very lovely is that the work in South Africa is actually being researched.
Oh,
so we're looking at what works, what doesn't work, what was easy, what was difficult, the change in we're taking a look at what level of education the local workers are having, and how important it is that they feel that they've really gained something and changed. And so the research there is, I'll send you some things that we've got on that, so that you can see where we are going with that. Again, so that we can be informed both by the experience, but also by a more robust look at things that possibly we would only be able to anecdotally say.
And anecdotes are so important, I believe, but I also love seeing how Montessori is constantly evolving. It's dynamic, it's fluid, it's flexible. It's all of the things that it says and teaches.
Trying to be.
I really appreciate that about Montessori and about the way you're representing it. And I'm also now very curious about the sports. So I'm going to, as soon as we are done talking, going to go and look that up. I know there's a TED talk by someone.
Yes, Ruben. He's Ruben 𝐼𝐚 𝐿. He is the kind of originator of it, and that evolved because my own son is a professional football player.
Oh, wow!
And Ruben was a head of talent development at the most famous youth academy in the world, Ajax.
Wow!
Here in the Netherlands, and Ruben noticed. Of course, all the children that are coming through the Ajax Academy are very talented, right? So the talent was not the issue, but he noticed something else. And so he got curious about the something else. And little by little, talked to my husband, talked to my son, talked to me. And he said, wait, let's look at this. And so he's now trained himself as a Montessorian. He's done all sorts of work. He's got in lots of professional coaches with him. They've retrained themselves. They want to change both what happens in Montessori schools, because there was a kind of, Montessorians don't do sport because it's competitive. Now, that's actually not true. When you go back into the archives, you see that Montessori had places with running tracks and, all sorts, and she wasn't against sport. But what she was against was this idea that it was just about winning. But the team collaboration, the fact that everyone should be out doing gross motor coordination, that she wasn't against. So we had a kind of, I would say, a glitch in our inherited thinking. And so now one of the works of Montessori sport is to use Montessorians, who he says are, of course, the most wonderful coaches because of what they come with. And so they then just get to see how to integrate it without disturbing the flow of any child's day, so that they can actually do it. And he also is committed to changing the way professionals coach sport, because he believes that with a different attitude, you actually get a different team. So that's really fun. And of course, they've got lots of research that's going on around it and so forth also. So you should, we can get you, if you want to talk to Ruben, that's not too difficult.
Yeah, that would be really fascinating for me. But I thank you for coming today, and I know we've been speaking for an hour. And I said, we're going to speak for 10, 15 minutes.
Thanks so much. It's lovely to see you. And I just feel that the connection that Adele helped us make has always just been there, even though we don't talk to each other on, for years on end. But
yes,
really,
and I mean, I'm very grateful to our meeting and how it affected me because my son is dyslexic, he's got dysgraphia, and he's got perceptual issues.
Yes.
You wouldn't know because we started using the method so early on. He's a voracious reader, and I didn't do anything. It happened. And I realized that, it was just the bootstrapping,
Yeah. Isn't that marvelous?
It was a thing of beauty. And what I appreciate most about him is a sense of humor. And that comes from the way we taught him and how we didn't get frustrated.
No.
So yeah.
No, but that's wonderful.
Thank you for that.
Nice to hear. Thank you so much. Bye now.
Bye.